Hi there, I thought I'd just do a quick video for you today, just showing you exactly how I was lucky enough and able to make $1 million or thereabouts in 1 year. And I say thereabouts because it might have been a little bit under that, might have been a little bit over $1 million, just depended on the value of the property at that time. So give or take, but either way, it was a very good thing. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is my spreadsheet, which I used a lot in the early days of building my portfolio, my property portfolio. And the main reason for that is by filling this out, it gave me a pathway to see what could potentially happen with these properties as I purchased them and then held on to them over time. So for example, before I get to the $1 million, I'll just take a step back and show you exactly how this works so it makes sense. So if we look at, actually just before I put that in there, if we look at along here, we've got the years 1 through to 10, okay, along the top here. Then down here we've got these columns, property 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the properties that you buy in order, depending on how many you buy. You might buy 1, you might buy 3, whatever. So in year 1, we buy our first property, which is property 1, okay? So in that first year, so we put in the value of the property. Let's say it was $400,000. So I'm buying that today, 400 grand. And then if I, let's say in year 3, over here, I buy my second property, property 2. Let's say that's worth $420,000. That goes in there. And then let's say year 5, I'm able to buy another property. That would be property number 3, because it's my third property, obviously. And let's say that's $500,000. Okay, and so on. You might skip 2 or 3 years, and you might buy. You may not buy your fourth property along here until year 8. So let's say that's another $500,000 property. Okay, so over that period of time, I bought 4 properties, all right? And then it's showing me over here the total of those properties, if they've compounded at a growth rate on average of 7% per year, each year for each of those properties. So this property, if it's compounded at 7% per year over 10 years, after 10 years it'll be worth $787,000. This one here, after, 7 years, because I bought it in year 3, will be worth $722,000. This one after 5 years would be worth $750,000, and this one after 2 years would be worth $613,000. So, sorry, that's actually 3 years. So it's 1, 2, 3. So this would be year 8, year 9, and year 10. It works out. Okay. So that's how this is calculated. It's just showing you the year, and then after 10 years, what that property would be worth. So it was giving me this scenario, okay, cool, if I buy a $400,000 property today, then in 10 years' time, at the average growth rate of 7%, it's going to be worth $787,000. Now, I can play around with this growth rate, but the reason I use 7% is because over a long period of time, 7% is what it generally averages out at. So you get periods of time when it's below that and periods of time when it's above that. But generally speaking, you'll find that if you extrapolate that out over a 15 or 20 year period, you'd be looking at around about a 7% growth rate. So if we use that and we know that that's going to work for us in that fashion, then this is what I would do. I'd put these numbers in here and go, oh, well, this is what's going to happen. So in this instance, I might have had, let's say $2.5 million worth of property. So I might have had total value here. We've got 500, a million, 1,820,000. Okay. So if I get rid of those, 1,820,000 worth just by buying those 4 properties. And I said, okay, today, if I had, as your portfolio grows, you can go, if I had $1,820,000 worth of property in the next 10 years, growing at 7% compounded, it's going to be worth 3.5 million, almost 3.6 million. And of course, down the bottom here, it shows you that total value and actually what your net worth is, okay? So assuming that we borrowed all that money to buy those properties, our actual equity in those properties after 10 years would be 1.7, getting on toward $1.8 million worth. And this is the thing that kept me going over time. So if we take a look at how this actually worked for me, so when I had around about $2.5 million worth of property, we'll put that in here because I only want to show you the growth for 1 year, because as I said, I made that $1 million in 1 year. So at the time of having 2,500,000, there we go. That's 25 million, sorry. 2,500,000. Maths is not an exact science, as they say. So 2,500,000 over 1 year growing at 7%. I'd only get $175,000 growth in my portfolio. Well, I say only, but in the particular year that I had that 2.5 million, the property market actually went up 40%. So if I change the growth rate for that 1 year to 40%, I went from 2.5 million to 3.5 million, and as you'll see, my net worth went up $1 million because we had such a huge amount of growth in 1 year. So if my portfolio had obviously been less than that, let's say it was $1 million at that point, let's say I had two properties worth 500,000, then my net worth would have increased by 400,000. All right. Obviously, the more I have, the better I would have done out of it with that 40% growth rate. And so it's true whether it's 20%, 10%, 5%, whatever growth rate. The more you're holding, the better obviously you're going to do out of it. It's basic because that's a fairly basic maths equation. So that's how I made $1 million in 1 year. And to be quite honest, I don't really understand why more people don't do this. I would suggest it's because it's lack of knowledge. People don't understand it. They think it's risky. They find it hard to assimilate. I'm not really sure, but it's certainly not difficult and it's possible for everyone. So if you were going to start out today, as I said before, and you were going to buy, let's say, a $500,000 property, we'll say 400,000. It's just the same process. Year one, property one, you buy that now, and then you accumulate over time. You might buy another $400,000 property, that would be your, property two. Getting myself confused here. Property two in year three, we pay 400,000, and then let's say in year six, so we've got two properties now. We buy our third property. Let's say that's 500,000. Okay, and then because we've got three properties growing, we can buy another one, which is a lot better than one growing at a time. We could buy another one in year 8. So we buy our fourth property, property 4 in year 8. Let's say that's another 500,000. And then in year 9, we can jump another one on the bandwagon there. So property number 5, let's say that's 550,000. Okay. So this is just, this isn't taking costs into account. It's just assuming you borrow all the money for that property at its face value there. So you borrow $400,000 for that one, you borrow 400 grand for that one, you borrow 500 for that one, 550 for this one, and so on. Normally what would happen if you had equity in your home and you weren't putting in actual cash deposit, then you wouldn't have to put any of your own money in. So you could actually just you'd borrow 400,000, but you'd also have costs associated with that. You might have LMI, you might have some stamp duty or whatever. So you might borrow 410, not 400. But just to keep things easy, I'm just doing the borrowings based on the value of the property that's being purchased. Okay, so I better change that growth rate out of 40% because that's not what's going to average over a long period of time. So it's going to average 7%. So if you accumulate that over time, then you can see after 10 years, this is what these properties are worth, 7% compounded. You got a $3.4 million property portfolio of just over $1 million growth over that period of time. So you can see that as you grow it, it's a much slower process. And I made that amount of money basically in 1 year because obviously the growth rate had got to a point where it was huge. Now those times will come again, whether it will be 40% or not, I'm not sure. We're pretty much knocking on the door of that now in terms of large growth rates, because we've had a very long stable period where in fact property prices have fallen in some areas quite a bit. So and that was mainly due to the last growth cycle that we had was very, very strong. And then property tends to take, after your major growth cycle, property tends to take a breather for quite some time. So it's in these growth cycles that you really make your money. And we're heading into our next one now. So if I'm going to click at this little tab down here, we can actually extrapolate that beyond this portfolio of, what do we got there, 5 properties, beyond 10 years. So if I click on that, then this was the 10-year data that I was just talking to you about, making $1 million at 7%. Then after another 5 years, after 15 years, our portfolio would be, without adding to it at all, without adding any more properties to it, we just held on to what we've got. The property portfolio value would be worth $4.5 million and would have $2.2 million in equity. And then after 20 years, we'd have a $6.3 million portfolio with $4 million in equity. Okay, so that's just at an average growth rate of 7% compounded per year. Okay, and you can play around with this kind of growth rate, which is what I've done. Very, very useful to see where you can potentially go over time. And it keeps you in the game. It keeps you focused on why you're doing what you're doing. Now, if each of these properties are paying for themselves, i.e. from the tenant and the tax man, you're not putting in anything into it. This is what I'm talking about, a background process working for you while it's out earning your job, because there's no way that you're going to make this kind of money from your job unless you've got a very good business, you're self-employed, you've got a business or something that's turning over a lot of money. But as a JOB, you're not going to out earn a good process running in the background for you. And the irony of it is that it takes less time and effort than working at your job, yet it's going to produce much, much bigger results. So once again, I'm not really sure why a lot of people don't do this. It's just lack of education, I think. So look, if that's something you're interested in, you'd like to get going, you'd like to see how you could start a process like this for you working in the background, you can click the link below this video and you can request a free consult with me. We can see what's possible for you, and maybe you can start on the road to starting your own property portfolio as well. Okay, that's it. I hope you have a great day, and I hope we'll talk soon.